Karen and William looked like the kind of couple straight out of a romance movie, the kind that makes you believe love is still worth it. Together for 8 years, they lived in a white brick house surrounded by flowers, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where neighbors smiled and waved every morning. William was a civil engineer, methodical and caring, a man of few words but strong gestures. Karen was the head nurse at a private hospital, sweet, outgoing, and in love with children. They had met during a blood donation drive and had been inseparable ever since. To outsiders, their marriage seemed perfect, but no one saw the silence at dinner. No one heard her sighs in the dark bedroom, nor noticed his vacant gaze as he pretended to read the newspaper. What was once a love full of sparks had grown tepid, and neither of them knew exactly when that had started. The truth is, behind the Instagram smiles and Sunday morning coffees in bed, there was a silent, voiceless pain neither of them could name. Karen had lost a baby, their first and only child, during a pregnancy that never made it past the 5th month. And even though they shared the grief, they never truly talked about it. William, pragmatic, avoided the subject. He believed showing pain was a sign of weakness. Karen, on the other hand, felt alone in her own marriage, suffocated by a grief that seemed hers alone. Every nursery she decorated at the hospital was a stab in the chest, and each time William hugged her without looking into her eyes, she felt invisible. The silence grew between them like a wall, and the love, that burning, desperate love, began to feel like nothing more than a memory. But there was still love. There were still memories of their wedding day, of the vows exchanged under the rain, of nights wrapped in old songs and cheap wine. There were still notes on the fridge, sweet messages on the bathroom mirror, unexpected gifts on ordinary days. There was still the memory of touch, of scent, of the certainty that this was home. And even though they were drifting apart, even though they didn't know how to find their way back, they still wanted to try. They just didn't know how. What neither of them knew, however, was that a decision was about to be made, an impulsive choice that would forever change the course of their love. And without her knowing, he was already about to discover everything. Their story was far from over, but the ending would be more tragic than anyone could ever predict. That cloudy Tuesday afternoon didn't feel any different from the others. Karen walked into the hospital early, put on her white coat, tied her hair in the same tight bun as always, and drank the lukewarm coffee from the machine she hated. But there was something in her eyes, something only someone who truly knew her could see. An existential fatigue, a weight in her chest that had nothing to do with the shift ahead. That week marked 2 years since the loss of their baby. 2 years of silent mourning, swallowed dry each day, hidden behind professionalism and kindness. William didn't mention it. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't hug her for more than 3 seconds. He didn't ask how she was. And even if it wasn't intentional, that hurt more than any cruel word. Because forgetting cuts deeper than disdain. It was in that context that Bruno entered the scene, the hospital's new medical resident. Young, intelligent, kind, with eyes always tuned to others' needs. Bruno was the complete opposite of William. Talkative, spontaneous, affectionate. And that day, when he saw Karen leaving the break room with teary eyes, he didn't hesitate. He asked if she was okay. She smiled weakly, said she was fine. He insisted, and that was all it took for her armor to start cracking. At the end of the shift, he walked her to the parking lot. They talked about work, the exhausting routine, music. Bruno mentioned he had recently lost his mother. Karen felt empathy. And when she stumbled in her heels on the stairs and he grabbed her arm, the touch lasted longer than it should have. It was the first moment in months when Karen felt truly seen. In the following days, the casual meetings became intentional. Bruno would leave a coffee in her locker. He'd send funny memes via text. He made up medical doubts just to spark a conversation. Karen resisted, deleted the messages, didn't reply, but she always smiled when his name popped up on her phone. At home, William remained distant. He tried to show affection through actions, cleaning the house, paying the bills, leaving dinner ready, but he never said what she most needed to hear. "I feel your pain. I still love you." The wall between them kept growing, and Karen, increasingly hurt, began to lose herself in her own guilt. Until one day, after a night shift and a breakdown in the break room, Bruno hugged her. A hug that lasted too long, and Karen didn't pull away. Not in that moment. Not in that longing. Not in that emptiness she could no longer hide. Not even from herself. The kiss came afterward. Quick, guilty, desperate. She cried, apologized, said she was married, that it couldn't happen. And Bruno respected that. He didn't push. But that kiss carried the spark of what would come next. Karen had crossed a line. And from that moment on, even if she tried to go back, she would never be the same. What she didn't know was that the next day, William would find her phone buzzing with a notification. "Thank you for yesterday. I fell asleep thinking of you. Signed, Bruno." William said nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't break anything. He simply turned off her phone, put it back where it was, and went to brush his teeth as if nothing had happened. But inside him, a silent earthquake had begun to destroy everything he believed in. And even so, he decided to stay. In the days that followed, William moved like a ghost who still breathed. Nothing in his routine changed. Coffee was still served on time, the trash taken out every Tuesday, bath towels folded with surgical precision. But inside, he had collapsed. Every gesture, every smile from her, every casual touch now carried the unbearable weight of a question. Is she still thinking about him? The name Bruno had become a permanent shadow in his mind. The message he'd read on her phone left no doubt. She had betrayed him. And the worst part, she carried on as if nothing had happened. But William was not impulsive. He wasn't the type to yell or cause a scene. He was made of silence, of restraint, of a pain that preferred to rot inside rather than spill into the world. And so, he made a decision. She would never know. He wouldn't say a word. Instead, he would change the game. He would choose to love her anyway. He would become the man she had lost. And he would prove, through actions, that his love was stronger than any betrayal. Karen, meanwhile, was drowning in guilt. After the kiss, she pulled away from Bruno, requested a transfer to another unit, and cut all contact. She began avoiding the hospital as much as possible, switching shifts, diving into online courses, and dedicating herself more to their home. That's when she noticed something different in William. He was more present. He began asking about her day again. He started leaving sweet notes, improvising flower arrangements with garden clippings. One Saturday, he prepared a full dinner, with wine and the same song that played on their wedding day. Karen cried, but she didn't tell him the truth, and that silence was eating her alive. With every act of affection from him, every unexpected touch, her guilt grew like a parasite. How can he still love me this much? If he only knew what I did. But he didn't. At least that's what she believed. And that was her only comfort. The mistake was buried, she thought, and no one else needed to suffer because of a moment of weakness. But William knew. He had known from the start. He knew when he read the message. He confirmed it when he checked her computer and found the search history with Bruno's name. He knew it by the way she avoided eye contact when talking about the hospital. But he didn't want revenge. He didn't want a confrontation. He wanted to understand how far love could go. He wanted to know if it was truly possible to continue after betrayal. Above all, he wanted to prove to himself that his love was stronger than his pride. And so, without her knowing, he began documenting everything in a notebook hidden deep in the back of his desk drawer. He wrote about his pain, his doubts, his plans. He wrote letters that would never be sent. Until one day, he wrote one that would. If one day you leave, or if something happens and I can't speak anymore, I want you to read this, because even after everything, I chose to love you. I knew, and still, I stayed. He planned to give her the letter soon, on a special day, maybe their next anniversary. He wanted her to know she had been forgiven, that he had chosen love instead of resentment. But fate doesn't wait, and tragedy was already on its way. It was a Sunday, with soft sunlight, the kind that feels like it belongs in an old photograph, with pale blue skies and birdsong slipping in through open windows. Karen woke up lighter that day. There was something different in the air, a calm silence that didn't bother her. William was in the kitchen, making pancakes, her favorite, and between shy laughs and lingering glances, it felt like they were finally finding each other again. After so many months of emotional distance, that breakfast was a small miracle. She watched William and wondered how she had almost thrown it all away over a fleeting impulse. And at the same time, she thought he never knew. She believed with all her heart that the mistake had been buried deep enough to never resurface. She didn't know that when he looked at her, every smile was a reminder of a pain still burning quietly. But William had a plan. That same day, after lunch, he walked into the office and pulled out the letter he'd been rewriting for weeks. It was long, but not dramatic. It began by recounting the day he discovered the betrayal. It spoke of pain, of anger, of the urge to leave, but then it unfolded into why he chose to stay. It described a conscious decision to continue, a faith that they could rebuild, the belief that true love doesn't ignore wounds, it embraces them. It was a beautiful letter, human, flawed, but full of hope. And at the end, he left a simple message. If you're reading this, it's because love won, even with everything. Because even wounded, I chose to love you. And that is all you need to know. He folded the page carefully, slipped it into an envelope with her name handwritten on it, and placed it in a wooden box inside the sock drawer. His plan was to give Karen the letter next weekend, when they'd celebrate 9 years together. He thought it would be symbolic, that she would cry, fall to her knees, beg for forgiveness, and he would finally hold her and say, I forgave you long ago. But fate doesn't wait for beautiful endings. On Wednesday of that same week, Karen called to say she'd be leaving the hospital early. A co-worker named Beatrice had switched shifts with her. She was excited to have dinner out with William. She wanted to talk about children, about travel, about the future they deserved to rebuild. William was happy. He planned to pick up flowers before meeting her, but she never made it home. The phone rang at 6:37 p.m. It was from Regional Hospital Bruno Cardoso, the same hospital where she worked. A car had run a red light and slammed into Karen's vehicle from the side. Skull fracture, broken ribs, internal bleeding. She had arrived unconscious, was intubated immediately. William didn't cry. He drove like a machine to the hospital, walked the hallways she knew so well, and entered the ICU room with a shattered heart. She was there, fragile, intubated, unconscious. The woman he had loved since youth was now fighting for her life and didn't even know that he knew everything, didn't know that he had already forgiven her, that he had the letter ready, that he had chosen to stay, that his love, even wounded, was still there, waiting for her. In the days that followed, William never left the hospital. He slept sitting up, with the folded letter in the pocket of his blazer. He prayed, silently, for a chance to say everything, that she'd wake up, that he could hold her one last time and say, I already knew. But Karen didn't wake up. The coma lingered, and time, as always, was cruel. Hours turned into days, and the days passed like a thick, suffocating fog in the white halls of the hospital. William could no longer tell morning from night. The hands of the wall clock seemed to mock him, spinning mercilessly as Karen's body remained still, attached to wires, machines, and a silence more painful than any scream. Room 306 in the ICU had become his entire world. There, between the scent of alcohol and the steady beep of the heart monitor, he relived everything. Every memory, every kiss from the past, every laugh muffled by time. And every detail of the moment he read that message that shattered it all. Yet even with the pain still burning in his chest, even with the memory of betrayal pulsing in his mind, punishment was never his goal. He only wanted one thing, one last chance to look into her eyes and say, I knew, and still, I chose to love you. Every day, William held her hand gently, like one cradles an ancient secret. He spoke softly, told stories, read passages from Karen's favorite books. He talked about the garden, how the flowers missed her. He spoke of the future, as if there still was one. And through all those moments, the letter was always there, folded inside the inner pocket of his grey jacket he no longer took off. With each passing day, the paper became more worn, the folds more defined, but the words within remained untouched. That letter was the bridge between what he knew and what she never had the courage to say. It was forgiveness before confession. It was love in its cruelest form, the kind that knows everything and stays anyway. At home, during quick showers or while grabbing clean clothes, William would stumble upon traces of Karen everywhere, her toothbrush still damp, her perfume in the air, a pair of socks left by the bed. And one day, he found an old planner she used for random thoughts. Flipping through its pages, between recipes and grocery lists, he found something that made his hands tremble, a hastily scribbled note, undated, likely written after the betrayal. It read, "I cheated, and I hate myself for it. It wasn't love, it was escape. I'm sorry. I love you more than I can explain, and if you ever find out, forgive me." It was the only physical evidence of her guilt, the only confession. William read it, reread it, and cried silently on the bedroom floor. She had written it. She was sorry, but never had the courage to give it, just as he never had the courage to confront her. Back at the hospital, the doctors began to prepare William for the worst. The chances of Karen waking up grew slimmer each day. The trauma had been too severe, and her intracranial pressure wasn't going down. One afternoon, Nurse Beatrice, Karen's colleague, entered the room quietly and left a single flower on the nightstand. She exchanged a glance with William and whispered, "She talked about you all the time, said you were her home." William shut his eyes, swallowing the cry building in his chest. If she wakes up, he thought, I won't waste a single second. He would tell her everything, show her the letter, hold her so tightly, so deeply, that no past mistake could ever pull them apart again. But time does not forgive those who wait too long. That night, the monitor beeped differently. Her heart rate fluctuated. Doctors rushed in, and William, standing just outside, clutching the letter in his hands, felt his world crumble before the confirmation came. Karen was slipping away, and he still hadn't said a word. The door to the room slammed shut as the medical team entered. William remained outside, motionless, eyes locked on the tiny window that barely revealed anything inside. In his pocket, the folded letter burned against his chest like a piece of red-hot coal. He trembled, for the first time in days, not from cold, but from pure terror. He knew this was the moment, the edge between possible and irreversible. He could smell the goodbye in the air, taste the metallic bitterness of absence, even before hearing the words that would change everything. A few minutes later, the ICU doctor stepped out, eyes low, voice lower. "William, she didn't make it. We did everything we could." That was it. A short phrase. Cold. Final. Karen was gone. William didn't cry at first. His body failed him. His legs buckled. His vision darkened. The sound of the world blurred into a dull hum. He walked to the bedside as if crossing entire universes. There she was. Karen, the love of his life, the woman he had chosen to love, even with the wounds, the betrayal, the unspoken lies. And now, she had left without ever knowing that he knew, without ever receiving the forgiveness he had carried with so much urgency in his chest. William sat beside her lifeless body. The machines had been turned off. The room now felt sacred. He pulled the letter from his pocket, looked at it for a long time, and began to read. His voice came out low, broken, but steady. He read every line with the calm of someone trying to carve those words into time. He confessed that he knew about the affair, that he saw the message, that he read the history, that he suffered in silence, but that he never stopped loving her, that he had chosen her again every single day, that he didn't want punishment. He wanted a new beginning. He wanted to heal, and he wanted her to know that she was forgiven, even if she'd never asked. And at the end, with tears in his eyes and a throat torn by grief, he whispered, "You didn't need to die thinking I loved you any less. I knew everything, and still, I stayed." Then, he placed the letter over her chest, folded with care, as if leaving a piece of his soul behind. The funeral was simple, intimate, without speeches, just close friends and a few colleagues from the hospital. No one knew the truth. No one imagined that inside that coffin lay an unfinished love story, scarred by mistakes, silences, and gestures of love that came too late. William remained silent, spoke to almost no one, except Beatrice, who hugged him tightly and whispered, "She loved you, deeply." He didn't respond. He simply smiled faintly. He knew it was true, and that made it hurt even more. At the burial, he dropped a single rose onto the grave, along with the letter she had written years earlier, the one where she asked for forgiveness, but never delivered it. He buried them together. 2 letters, 2 confessions, 2 wounded loves forgiving each other. Too late. Time, for those who suffer, doesn't heal. It merely covers the wounds with a thick layer of silence. After the funeral, William returned to a house where every corner screamed Karen's name. The left pillow on the couch still held the shape of her body. The shampoo in the bathroom, the coat behind the door, her favorite mug in the drying rack, everything was her. But what hurt the most was what couldn't be seen. The absence of her voice, the lightness of her touch, the sound of bare feet in the morning. William, now a silent widower, became a shadow inside his own home. He spent hours in the garden where she loved planting lavender, or locked in the bedroom, rereading the letters he once wrote, letters that no longer had a destination. Sometimes he fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in the jacket that still carried her scent. Other times he wrote new letters that would never be sent. Beatrice, Karen's colleague, began visiting William from time to time. She brought food, spoke little, and respected the silences. On one of those visits, she left an envelope on the table and said only, "I found this in the hospital drawer, among the duty papers. I think it was meant for you." William recognized Karen's handwriting instantly. His heart raced. He opened the envelope with trembling hands. It was a letter, one she had written shortly after the betrayal. It said, "William, I never imagined I could hurt you, but I did. And I don't have the courage to say it out loud because the fear of losing you is stronger than any guilt. But if this ever reaches you, it's because something stopped me from telling you. Maybe time, maybe fate, maybe myself. But what you need to know is, I made a mistake, and I regret it. Not because I was caught, but because hurting you felt like tearing myself apart. I love you, and even if you leave, I still love you." William read the letter in silence, his eyes burning, his chest on fire. She had written it. She regretted it. She had tried, in her own way, to redeem herself, but fate had been faster than the confession. And now, all that remained were 2 letters. His, written to say, "I forgive you." Hers, written to say, "Please forgive me." 2 truths that missed each other by mere seconds, maybe days. And now, they sat side by side only on paper. It was as if they had lived a love story that worked, just too late. William placed the new letter in the same wooden box where he kept his. He didn't burn it, didn't bury it. He simply left it there, so that time, someday, might know what happened. And that night, for the first time since Karen's death, he cried out loud. He wept like someone who bleeds, like someone who loves too deeply, like someone who lost everything for waiting too long. The world moved on. Time advanced. But William was never the same. He became a quiet man, walking the streets with slow steps and a distant gaze. He never fell in love again, never tried to start over. He carried within himself a mourning not only for her death, but for everything left unsaid, for everything that could have been, for the letter she never read, and for the truth she never knew, the truth that he knew everything. And still, he chose to stay. Months passed. The seasons changed. The garden Karen once tended began to bloom without her, as if nature itself refused to accept her absence. William kept the house spotless, as if expecting her to return at any moment. He watered the plants at the same time she used to. He bought the same cookies she loved, even though no one would eat them. He set the dinner table with 2 plates, 2 glasses, and a silence that screamed between them. It wasn't just longing, it was denial. His soul desperately trying to keep alive the woman who left without knowing the truth, without knowing she was loved, accepted, embraced, even after breaking something sacred. And that, more than anything, was what destroyed him. Not the fact that he lost her, but the fact that he never had the time to free her from guilt. William began to write every day. He filled notebooks with letters starting with E, "Dear Karen," and ending with E, "I love you, even still." Autumn. He wrote as if still talking to her. He shared his day, the little things, the memories that crept in at night like gentle ghosts. In some entries, he described his dreams, the ones where she woke up in the ICU, smiled weakly, and he'd say, I know. I always knew. But upon waking, everything returned to the same emptiness. The only thing that remained were the letters, his and hers, preserved like relics inside the wooden box he now kept in his bedroom, placed on the dresser. That box had become his confidant, his altar, his emotional tomb, and there, resting together, were the only words that truly mattered, the confession of a betrayal and the testimony of a forgiveness that never arrived in time. One day, Beatrice invited him to the hospital where Karen had worked. They were planning a tribute in the hallway of the pediatric wing. William hesitated. He thought he wouldn't be able to handle it, but he decided to go. And upon arrival, he saw something that froze him from the inside. A small plaque had been placed in the garden corner of the children's wing, engraved with the words, "To the one who cared with love for every life, even when her own soul was in pieces. Thank you, Karen. That was too much." He sat on a bench, stared at the ground for a long time, and felt the crushing weight of everything he carried. The pain, the love, the longing, the regret, the forgiveness. And then, in that hospital where she had given so many years, where everything began and, in a way, everything ended, William opened the box and read both letters aloud, his and hers, to no one, or perhaps to her spirit, if it lingered nearby, to the walls, to the flowers, to the universe. In that moment, something inside him shifted, not healed, not freed, but transformed. He understood, with cruel clarity, that true love sometimes doesn't save, doesn't prevent tragedy, doesn't stop the end. Sometimes love only survives what destroys it, and that's what makes it so pure and so painful. William returned home that day older, more tired, but somehow more whole. He knew there would never be another Karen, that no other woman would fill that space. But he also knew that, in life, he chose to love her until the very end. And that this, even without applause, even without redemption, even without a reply, was the greatest act of love a person could ever offer. The years that followed passed slowly, silently, marked by a routine no longer tied to time, but to memory. William didn't age like other men. He faded, as if each cell of his body was being consumed, little, by Karen's absence. He stopped working, sold the engineering company, left behind the professional life that once defined him, and moved to a small town where no one knew him as Karen's widower, and where he could live with his pain in peace. He took only a few things: the box of letters, their wedding album, some clothes, and a sprig of lavender from the garden of their old house. He planted the lavender beside the porch, and every day he watered it as if tending the only living thing that still connected him to the past. In the new town, William became known as the man with the letters. He was often seen sitting in the town square, writing in his blue notebook, always alone, always with that distant look. He didn't talk much, but when someone started a conversation, he smiled gently. One day, a woman named Bruna, also a widow, sat beside him and asked, "Do you write to someone?" He replied with eyes full of tenderness, "I write to someone who's gone, but still lives in here." Why some? She didn't ask anything else. She understood, in that silence, that there was a story too big to be reduced to words, and too big to ever be forgotten. Despite the solitude, William was not bitter. He was kind, soft-spoken, a man who carried sadness in his eyes, but kindness in his hands. He helped his neighbors, tended the church garden, wrote letters to terminal patients he never met, as if the world needed more words of love before the end. Every year, on Karen's birthday, he baked a small cake, placed 2 candles, and ate it in silence. Then, he'd write one more letter, fold it gently, and place it in the box. In total, he wrote over 80 letters through the years, all to her, all ending with the same line, "Even with everything, I still love you." As time went on, William's health began to fade, not suddenly, but softly, as if his body was finally allowing itself to rest after years of holding so much inside. He developed a heart condition but refused to be hospitalized. He said he preferred to stay home, among his lavender and his letters, rather than surrounded by machines and white corridors, the same ones where life had wounded him forever. Beatrice, who remained a distant but loyal friend, called once a week. They spoke little. She'd ask, "Do you still dream of her?" And he always replied, "Every night." Once she asked, "If you could see her again, what would you say?" He smiled and said, "Nothing. I'd just hold her, tight enough so she'd know I already knew and had already forgiven." In the last winter of his life, William wrote his final letter. It was short, different from the others. Just 3 lines. "Today I feel close. If I get there before you find me in a dream, know this. I waited for you every day and forgave you every one of them." He placed that letter on top of the others in the box, closed it gently, and left it beside his bed. He fell asleep with their wedding album open on his chest, one hand touching the photo of their ring exchange, and the other resting over the letter. The next morning, he didn't wake up. It was Bruna, the neighbor, who noticed his absence. Every day, at 7:30 sharp, he would water the lavender on the porch like a sacred ritual. But that day, the bucket remained full, the gate unlocked, the windows too tightly closed for a man who always welcomed the sun. Bruna knocked, called, waited. Nothing. The silence wasn't just physical, it was a warning. She entered gently, as if stepping into a chapel. The house was clean, tidy, serene. The scent of lavender filled the air, and in the bedroom, the sweetest and cruelest scene she had ever witnessed. William lying in bed, wearing his favorite jacket, the wedding album open on his chest, his face peaceful, as if sleeping. Beside him, the box of letters, and on his chest, carefully folded, the last one, the last thing he had written, the final testament of a love that even death could not interrupt. Bruna didn't cry, not immediately. She sat beside the bed, took the letter without opening it, and held his now cold hand. She whispered, "Now you can tell her all of it, face to face. Is that what we call reunion? Eternity? Perhaps. Perhaps there is something beyond death for those who love too much." Maybe William knew that day would come. Maybe when he wrote that last letter, he felt it was his goodbye. His heart stopped in his sleep. There was no pain, no fight, only a deep, final silence. A deserved rest after so many years carrying a love that, though incomplete, was never small. The funeral was quiet. Beatrice came from afar to say goodbye. She was the one who told the few attendees, with a trembling voice, about the letters. He loved her more than she ever knew, and forgave her without her ever asking. There were no dramatic tears, only silence, respect, admiration. When the ceremony ended, Bruna handed Beatrice the final letter, and Beatrice, in turn, walked to the grave where Karen had been buried, opened the box William had kept, and placed into the earth the words he had so longed for her to hear. She buried with him the weight and beauty of a love that endured the unforgivable. All the letters were copied by Beatrice and organized in a hardcover journal she titled simply, "Even with Everything." She didn't publish it, didn't advertise it. She left one copy in the town library. No author's name, no date, no vanity, just words. Words that burned, that forgave, that revealed what so many feel, but few dare to say. And on the cover, handwritten in small ink, he knew, and still, he stayed. William died in peace, but he left the world with a painfully beautiful lesson, that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't saying everything in time, but loving, even when time fails. That forgiveness can be quieter than guilt, and that love, when it's real, doesn't demand perfection, only presence. And he stayed until the end. Long after William's death, his name was no longer mentioned at city lunches or in neighborhood conversations, but in the local library, that hardcover notebook remained. Slowly aging among other volumes no one touched. It was discreet, no title on the spine, no author, no ISBN, just a carefully bound book with slightly yellowed pages and handwritten letters. The library staff treated it with a certain reverence, like a relic of something sacred, and from time to time, someone would discover it. A young woman with a broken heart, an old man with sad eyes, a lonely nurse seeking solace. Each person who opened those pages encountered a real story, not of princes and princesses, but of an ordinary man who loved until the end, even with a wounded heart. And everyone who read it cried. The power of that notebook was inexplicable. There were no exaggerations, no dramatic flourishes, just words written by someone who never expected to be read, and perhaps that's what made them so deep. The letters narrated the discovery of betrayal, the internal struggle, the choice to remain silent, the weight of forgiveness, the grief lived in secret. But they also captured the everyday details of love, the way Karen combed her hair, the movies they watched together, the taste of the chamomile tea she drank on cold nights. William had turned his pain into testimony, and without intending to, he taught anyone who read it that love isn't just what survives the good times. It's what endures what should have destroyed it. One day, a young woman named Bianca, whether by coincidence or fate, found the notebook while looking for something to pass the time. She sat in a corner of the library and, without realizing it, spent hours immersed in its pages. When she finished, tears streamed freely, and her heart ached in a way she couldn't explain. She had cheated on her boyfriend months before, never confessed. He ended the relationship without ever knowing, and she lived with the torment of regret. Those letters felt like they were speaking to her guilt, to her loneliness. She checked out the notebook, read it again at home, and the next morning wrote her own letter, a confession, a request for forgiveness, a new beginning, not with him, but with herself. And so, without ever meaning to, William began healing other hearts. His words, written in the darkness of a lonely bedroom, came to life beyond time, touching people he never met. And Karen, unknowingly, became not a symbol of betrayal, but of redemption. Her pain became a bridge to other pains, her mistake a catalyst for new truths. And the love William chose to give, without reward, became a seed, one that bloomed in the most unexpected places, in the library, in the notebook, in the hearts of those who read it. Over time, William's notebook became a quiet cult object. It didn't sit in store windows, didn't inspire news articles, was never turned into a movie, but it was sought by people who arrived at the library in silence, asked for that story of the letters, and sat in a specific corner of the room where an old leather chair seemed molded for those who carried the weight of what was never said. It was there that people cried, quietly, without shame. There, cold men crumbled. Hurt women found strength again. Young people wrote their first letters with fear and courage. William's love, made of forgiveness, patience, and surrender, became a mirror for anyone trying to understand what love really is when it stops being romanticized. Beatrice, now elderly, still visited the small town. She had become the quiet guardian of that legacy. From time to time, she'd bring flowers to William and Karen's graves, buried side by side. She cleaned the headstones gently, shared the latest news, and left a new letter written by someone touched by their story. Over the years, the wooden box was replaced by a small glass urn inside the library, where copies of the most touching letters written by readers inspired by that tragic love were kept. Among them, a note written by Beatrice on aged paper with firm handwriting. They didn't have time to forgive each other in life, but they taught the world that forgiveness, even unspoken, is still the greatest act of love one can leave behind. Some visitors asked if it was all real, if the notebook wasn't fiction, if William ever truly existed, and Beatrice just smiled and said, "You still need to ask? Feel the silence. Read the words. Do you think something that deep could be made up?" Because the truth is, love lived in silence has a devastating power. It doesn't scream, but it echoes. It doesn't explode, but it lingers. And that is what survives. Not the grand gesture, not the wild passion, but the daily, painful, steady choice to keep going even when everything tells you to let go. William wasn't a hero, wasn't perfect. He was an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart, and his legacy wasn't wealth, fame, or children. It was a story, a testimony, a shared scar that now helped others to heal. The lavender he planted on the porch of that small town house became a symbol of grief and tenderness. Visitors would pick sprigs and press them between the pages of books, as if taking a piece of what was lived there. The house was eventually donated to the city and turned into a listening space for people in emotional pain. And above the fireplace, a small frame, with no fancy border, displayed a single phrase written by his hand. I knew, and still, I stayed. In that small frame hanging above the fireplace of William's house, now turned into a space for listening and emotional refuge, the phrase, I knew, and still, I stayed, became more than just a memory. It was a universal declaration, simple, profound, untouchable. Visitors came from different cities just to sit in that worn-out armchair in the living room and read that line out loud. Many cried just from seeing it. Others remained silent, as if they had finally found the words to translate something they'd carried in their chest for years. The house, though modest, had transformed into an emotional sanctuary. People didn't come for sightseeing. They came to feel, to understand, to forgive themselves. Every room in the house was preserved just as it had been when William lived there. The furniture remained in the same places, the letters in the same drawers. One of the living room walls was dedicated to replicas of notes left by visitors, small messages of regret, gratitude, and confession, a mural of sorrows being released. There was, for instance, a message from a man that read, I found out too, but unlike William, I left. Now I understand that maybe my absence hurt more than the betrayal. And also a note from a woman that said, my mother was betrayed and never got over it, never forgave. She died bitter. I don't want that ending for myself. Each note, a story. Each letter, a delayed redemption. William, without ever asking for it, had become a lighthouse for those navigating the dark seas of the heart. Beatrice began hosting group talks with widowers, the betrayed, regretful betrayers, young people with interrupted loves, mothers and fathers who lost children and lost themselves. And in every conversation, they returned to the essence of what William had lived. Love doesn't make us immune to pain, but it teaches us how to walk through it. Forgiveness is not blind acceptance or forgetting. It's freeing oneself from the prison of wanting the other to suffer. It's saying, I bled too, but I choose to go on. And perhaps that was the greatest act of all. William didn't just forgive, he stayed. And by staying, he left a space in the world where pain isn't hidden, but welcomed. The original notebook, aged and fragile, was sealed and placed under a glass dome in the house's study. Beside it, an open copy, eternally displaying the most famous letter, the one he wrote to Karen days before the accident, the one that said, if you're reading this, it means love won, even after everything. And next to it, the last letter he wrote before dying, the two together, side by side, like their bodies in the cemetery, like their souls in the story, like forgiveness and guilt when they finally meet. William and Karen's story never made headlines. No TV station ever went to the house turned into an emotional refuge. No publisher wanted to print the notebook. They said it was too sad, too personal, too introspective. But what they didn't know was that, in that quietude, lived the power of a truth that didn't need a stage to transform those it touched. The love between them, stained, patched, imperfect, became a mirror where everyone could see themselves, not as heroes or victims, but as flawed human beings with their shames, their silences, their reckless acts, and their ability to still feel, even after being broken. The letters were slowly translated into other languages by volunteers. The notebook began to circulate among therapists, priests, psychologists, and educators. It was used in marriage counseling sessions, forgiveness lectures, and emotional writing workshops. And even without a known author, without a happy ending, without the commercial formulas of a bestseller, it became indispensable for those seeking to understand the raw and most human side of love. William's name became synonymous with a choice few are able to make: to love even after the abyss, to stay even after the fall, to forgive without ever receiving an apology, and to live even after the other has gone. Many asked if he ever regretted it, if it wouldn't have been better to confront Karen, demand explanations, walk away. But anyone who read the letters understood this wasn't weakness. It was strength, the courage to remain whole where others would have shattered. And that forgiving, in his case, wasn't about forgetting. It was remembering with dignity. It was choosing peace over punishment, letting love speak louder than ego. Because in the end, William died with peace in his heart, without doubt, without hate, without the weight of the unsaid. He had said it. In words, in actions, in silence. He said it when he stayed, when he wrote, when he kept the letter, when he read it out loud beside her body, and he said it one last time, when he fell asleep with the image of the love of his life on his chest and the certainty that, even betrayed, even hurt, even broken inside, he had loved with everything he had. And that is eternity, not perfect love, but love that survived imperfection, love that doesn't need applause, that doesn't require witnesses, that is enough on its own. Years after William's death, when many who had known him had already passed, when the house turned into a refuge was now managed by new hands, and when the original notebook had been permanently sealed to preserve its fragile pages, a letter was found inside a yellowed envelope, forgotten between two floorboards in the couple's old bedroom. The discovery happened during a routine renovation. It was a letter no one knew existed. Written in the same steady, restrained handwriting of William, the text was brief. It was dated 3 days before his death. It didn't seem to be addressed to Karen, nor to anyone specific. Perhaps it was a letter to the world, or to himself, or maybe to all those who would one day wonder whether love is still worth it, even when it hurts. The letter read, "If someday someone asks why I stayed, even knowing about the betrayal, tell them that love is not a contract, it's a choice. Tell them that forgiveness is not weakness, it's freedom, and that there's something infinitely greater than the pain of being betrayed. It's the pain of no longer loving. I stayed because I still loved, despite everything. I stayed because her love, even broken, was still my home. If I had walked away, I would have taken my body, but left my soul, and that I wouldn't have been able to bear." The letter was read aloud at the annual memorial held in the house, a simple gathering where people read excerpts from the letters, shared their own stories, and wrote new ones. At the end of that ceremony, everyone lit candles in front of a small mirror installed in the old bedroom. In it, visitors saw their own reflection beneath the phrase engraved below the glass. "Have you ever stayed, even knowing?" The story of William and Karen didn't end when both of them died, because it was never just about them. It was about everyone who has ever loved too much, about those who forgave in silence, about those who died without explaining themselves, about those who stayed, those who left, those who kept quiet, and those who waited for a word that never came. It was about all who once lay beside someone and cried facing the other side of the bed, about those who wrote a letter they never had the courage to deliver, and about those who carry inside their chest words that will only be read when it's too late. And in the end, what remains? A phrase, a whisper, a long and tragic sigh. She died without knowing that he knew all along. And he died without knowing that just 1 second more would have been enough for her to say she loved him, regretfully, until the very end.